first of all, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So, stroke. Strokes have had a significant impact on your life, both personal and professional, as they do with many people we'll find out tonight. But I'm struck by the story that you and I discussed about being in the hospital with one of your grandmothers who suffered a stroke. And doctors essentially told you, we've administered a drug to her, and now it's time to hope and pray. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that was a few years ago, and I hope for my sake and everybody in here's sake that we've come a lot further in the therapeutic treatment of stroke than hope and pray, but maybe you could give us a little bit of a primer in terms of where we're at today in this market.
Well, just by way of background, so I'm a nurse by training. I was a fourth-year nursing student, and I got a call from my mom and dad that one of my grandmothers was having a stroke, and I was the nearest to her. I was about 2 hours away. So I hopped in a car, drove to Amarillo, Texas, got there. She was in the emergency room. She was aphakic, so she couldn't speak, and she couldn't move the left side of her body. And the physicians came in, a nurse and a physician, and they were hanging a medication. And so, fourth-year nursing student, I'm saying, okay, what's the treatment plan? What are we doing here? And he said, we're going to hang this bag, and then we're going to hope and we're going to pray. And that was TPA. And up until just a few years ago, actually, TPA was the only therapy for stroke.
TPA is what, just for?
TPA is a drug. It's a thrombin-busting, clot-busting drug. Mm-hmm. That was given in the cardiac space for many years, but they moved beyond that with device intervention. We may be in a position to do that at some point in time. But at that point in time, that's all you could do, was give TPA and hope. And TPA in the most severe strokes is actually not that effective. To give you an idea, someone presenting like her has less than a 25% chance of actually being not profoundly disabled, such that she's going to require care, she can't walk across the room. So the odds for patients were not great. TPA, in the largest studies, improved disability, good neurological outcome, less than 10% of patients actually shifted from one less disability to another. Mm-hmm. So I actually made my way to Southern California and to the company that I work with today because I got a call. I was with KCI, and I got a call from Dave Mowry saying that they had a stroke study that had been stopped early on mortality. And they needed somebody to come help them really put this together and package it and take it to the FDA. So I'm a general manager of our business now, but the majority of my career actually was headed up medical affairs. So I was a vice president of medical affairs. So I came out here to interview. They had me at Hello with a device demonstrating mortality reduction in stroke. And that was the initial study that got the initial device approved. We have a small device that can go through the groin and go into the brain and integrate into a clot and then pull a clot out of a large vessel occlusion, really changing outcomes for stroke patients overall.
So we have come some distance, but
technology has.
Yes.
Systems of care, maybe not.
Okay.
So if you look today, it's about 10% to 15% of people in the United States who are eligible for this therapy to go in and pull the clot out, get it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Part of it is stroke systems of care. Mm-hmm. The underlying medical system hasn't evolved with the technology. Part of it's because the first thing you want to do when you have a stroke or when, grandma's slurring her words. She must be really tired. Maybe she had one more glass of wine than she was supposed to. We should go have her lay down for a few minutes, right? Or I'm not feeling well, my hand feels weak, I'm going to go sit and relax. And the problem is when you become aphakic, you can't tell somebody that you don't feel better, right? So, that's the insidious nature of stroke. Yeah. And knowing the signs and symptoms is one of the critical pieces, and really knowing to seek care the same as you would if you were having a heart attack. Right. And they just don't present the same.
I know the numbers, what are they, like 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people have a stroke, but put some color on that so we can understand.
So let me ask, how many of you, can you raise your hand if you, I'm hoping none of you, but you or a friend or a family member has been affected by stroke. Yeah, this is what usually happens, right? To give you, if you think about global burden or health impact from stroke, stroke's going to affect 1 in 6 of us in the room. A stroke happens every 2 seconds in the world. Every 6 minutes, you're looking at substantial number of people who die. It's the #1 cause of death over the age of 60. It's the #1 cause of disability around the world. It's the #1 cause of death in China. It's the #1 cause of death in Brazil. It's the #1 cause of death in Saudi Arabia, Egypt. Let me go down the list. So more people will die of stroke than tuberculosis, malaria, HIV, all of those conditions, infectious disease conditions combined. So I think most of us, just don't know that. Yeah. And stroke is a condition that it's not visible to you. When somebody has profound disability from stroke, you don't see them at Walmart or at the Mission Viejo Mall, right? Because they're disabled. And so it's almost a condition that's behind the curtain because of the nature of the disease itself.
And so you're saying that only 10% are receiving this treatment, the solitary, well, not just the solitary treatment, but any surgical intervention. Currently, if you suffer from a stroke, what is the pathway of care for you in a typical scenario?
So I would love to tell you that there's a straight answer to that. The question is, it depends. And I'm going to give you a story. Keely Ryan told me it's okay to use her name. She is one of our employees, Medtronic employees in Australia. And her dad, a few months ago, had a stroke in Shawnee, Oklahoma, just outside of Oklahoma City. They did the right thing. They took him to the hospital. He went to a primary stroke care center. They started TPA. He wasn't getting better. They put him in an ambulance, and they drove him past not 1, not 2, but 3 comprehensive stroke care centers that were capable of doing this intervention that I'm talking about. On that little drive that he took, he was losing 1.9 million neurons per minute. So for every minute you delay treatment in a large vessel occlusion, you lose 1.9 million neurons. I don't know about you guys, but I need every one that I have to function on a daily basis. And so the absence of requirements legislation allowed him to be transported to another hospital that had an affiliated agreement with the primary stroke care center, because there's nothing in the state of Oklahoma that says he has to be transferred to the nearest comprehensive center. Unfortunately, there's nothing in 30 states that say you have to be transferred to a comprehensive center. Baylor, Texas, you have a stroke in Baylor, and the law actually requires that they take you to a primary stroke care center. So a primary stroke care center can give you TPA. They're able to do a CT scan and determine whether or not you have a bleed in your brain or a blockage, and then they can give you the clot-busting drug, but that's what they're capable of doing. They take you there, even if you're outside the window for TPA, which is 4.5 hours. They take you there if you have a condition like maybe you had surgery, 5 days ago. This happens. People get deep vein thrombosis and they throw a clot, and you're not eligible to get TPA, they still take you there. And the data shows, we did a large registry, the data shows that if you're transferred to one of those centers before you go to a comprehensive stroke care center, it's a 90-minute delay on average. 90 times 1.9, it's not a pretty sight. So for every 30 minutes you're delayed from getting intervention, you decrease the likelihood of a good outcome, not zero disability, but what we would consider reasonable functional independence by 10%. So there's a situation today where, it sounds horrible, but I tell people, if your loved one's having a stroke, put them on a bike in the middle of the street and push them over. Because if you're a trauma patient, you're guaranteed to get treatment within the golden hour. And so I'm a trauma nurse by training. I was a flight nurse, trauma nurse. And there is a system in the country that makes sure that if a patient's having a massive injury, that they have a direct route to care, that there are designated trauma centers, and that everybody knows where those are. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen with stroke. When half your brain, or a good part of half of your brain may be cut off from oxygen, there's no designated pathway.
Well, A, why? And then B, who sets these standards?
So the American Heart Association, American Stroke Association certainly helps designate primary and comprehensive stroke care centers. The problem is a primary and a comprehensive center in concept were not so different before, because they could both give you the drug. If you needed a higher level of care, like you had a big bleed in your brain, they could transfer you. That's really changed in the last 5 years, and the healthcare system just has not caught up with that. Now, in some states, there's hope. So Rhode Island put in legislation about 1.5 years ago, and all the legislation says is you have to assess the patient to see if they have a high likelihood of a large vessel occlusion, meaning a severe stroke, right? And what are the signs and symptoms of stroke? Does anybody heard of the FAST campaign? Anybody who's seen that on TV? Facial droop, facial anomaly, right? Arm weakness, speech difficulty, time to call 911. So I'm going to save a life tonight.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to participate with us. We do something called Take 2, Tell 2. Take 2 minutes, learn the signs and symptoms of stroke, and go tell 2 people you think could be at risk. Because if people would just know those signs, time to call 911, that's the good part of it. Most people believe that at the time you dial 911, the healthcare system is set up to make sure you get where you need to go. The legislation in Rhode Island says that EMS has to assess you and find out if they think you're having a large vessel occlusion, and if so, they take you directly to the Comprehensive Stroke Care Center. We've been able to show in that study that you could drive a patient an additional 20 miles and take them to a Comprehensive Stroke Care Center, and they still get TPA faster. So the only reason to stop in the primary center was to get a patient TPA faster, but you can get it faster going to the comprehensive center even with an additional 20 miles, because speed is everything in these centers. So it's like the trauma concept.
Yeah.
I think, advocate, legislate. I say the most important thing we can do today in stroke, unfortunately, isn't innovation. It's legislation. And I think most people, the average person, doesn't know that this can happen for their family member.
Yeah. But I mean, surely this is an area where there's great medical centers, great hospitals. I mean, if you were to have a stroke in Orange County, in Irvine, don't you think you'd be okay because the local hospitals are pretty good?
So we do have interventional programs in a number of hospitals here. LA put routing legislation that you have to consider bypass to a comprehensive stroke care center like a year ago. Doesn't mean the systems are optimized, but I will tell you, we're far more fortunate than somebody in Dallas, Texas, or Washington, D.C., or I can go through the list. There's 10x variations today within major metropolitan areas of the delivery of interventional care. So I hope that I'm going to sit up here 4 years from now if I'm invited back and have a different conversation with you. But I'll tell you the cold, hard truth about stroke today is the reason 10 to 15% of patients in the best medical system in the world are getting treatment is because of these block and tackle issues. It's actually not an innovation issue.
So where I live in Boston, which is the hub of great medical care, and I've been bragging about it for my whole life, I'm not okay there.
There are 5 hospitals in Boston that can do this procedure. There's not optimally established routing policies, I think.
Okay.
I was actually with that group of stroke interventionalists just about 2 months ago. So it's improved dramatically in Boston, but if you live just outside of Boston, the fact that you might get dropped off at a center that can't treat you effectively when they could have driven you an extra 5 miles or 10 miles, and literally that happens. Houston's a great example, right? There's no legislation that mandates that. You have all these hospitals within a 2-mile radius of the medical center in Houston, and then you have these smaller hospitals just on the outside that are all primary stroke care centers. So literally an ambulance company can drop a patient off at the hub when they're 3 miles from a comprehensive center in absence of legislation today.
Wow. So I assume that as the world, one of the world leaders in these therapies, part of your job must be to create awareness among both the EMS service and the care specialists. But give us an example of how you guys are kind of working behind the scenes to set these standards. And are you alone there? Or are you with other technology companies here pushing that?
So I think we were the first out there. Medtronic partnered with American Heart Association on the FAST campaign, which was truly just a public awareness campaign to teach people, look, if you see these signs and symptoms, treat it like an emergency. Call 911, get to the hospital. We actually have created a specialized sales force. It's a market development sales force that does nothing but stroke. And what they do is they work within a region to connect all the EMS teams. People don't understand the average turnover, you turn over the entire staff of an EMS unit typically within a year by statistics. They have very high turnover rates, so maintaining proficiency, stroke may be only 2 out of 100 calls that an EMS person takes in a year. So between turnover and less frequency, you really have to keep that up. You have to drive, there's the emergency physician who controls the patient in the smaller hospital, maybe not a stroke neurologist. You coordinate with stroke neurology, with imaging, and so that's what this sales force does, is they work on systems of care. And it was a workaround for us to drive awareness and training and education, and we've been able to show that you can impact that. Some of our competitors or partner companies, Stryker, I think is following suit and really finding that with this kind of investment, you can do this, right? That's in the US. Think about what this looks like in Russia or in Kenya, where there's one doctor who knows how to do this procedure. I always say, addressing this is a very controversial statement, but I'm known for doing these things. Addressing third world healthcare, like Africa, like Russia, like Eastern Europe, like the United Kingdom, don't have a stroke in the UK. Statistically, it's a very bad thing.
Really?
NHS has just started funding for this, but the likelihood that you will get intervention in the UK is incredibly low.
You're talking about astounding numbers. Why in the world would that be the case? If this is so common that 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people are having stroke, why would the stroke treatment market be so far? Why would the standards of care be behind, say, heart attack?
Well, so we all know heart attack the way we know it today. And from the beginning of treatment for acute MI, they've been able to reduce mortality by 10x, right? It's incredible. That took 30 years, right?
Yeah.
I always, it's my role to not just be a critic of the healthcare system. So things are moving. The severity of this disease begs that they move faster. And if nothing else, money talks. We spend $34 billion on stroke in the United States every year. The economic data from the study we conducted, the initial study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, shows that if you take just the direct healthcare costs to the patient, not lost work time, and by the way, this is not an old person's disease. The median age of people in these studies was about 52, so I don't know how many of you out there, I'm getting close to that, right? It's not an old person's disease. 1 in 5 people who suffer a stroke are still working, and less than 50% of those people are ever able to go back to any form of work. But you can treat every patient in the United States healthcare system, if you look at the total 1-year cost, for $68. The numbers needed to treat to improve outcome here are like 1 in 2.5. So they're right up there with antibiotics. Cardiac intervention, cardiac defibrillators, pacemakers are about 1 in 8. And this is 1 in 2.5. So the economics of this would beg that we do this. The problem is you get into, just like you do with so many diseases, the burden of the procedure, it's $15,000, $20,000 procedure in total in the cath lab. The burden of the procedure is all acute care cost. The benefit for the healthcare system is all downstream cost, right? And so they don't come out of the same bucket of money, and that happens in a lot of healthcare systems. So health economics and taking this data and getting the word out that this is economically viable, humanitarian work that we should be doing, I think is a big charge. And we're blessed as a medical device company. There's very few times I think you get to do such good business and humanitarian work at the same time. And really getting stroke treated is humanitarian work.
So your grandmother, that was about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. We were sort of a little fuzzy on the timeline, but
yeah,
I got to be honest.
That was not by accident.
I got to be honest,
only
10% of our people are getting this treatment. I don't know how far we are past hope and pray.
There's still a lot of hope and pray that goes on.
That's scary as hell.
Yeah, no, I have been on the phone with Medtronic family members talking to EMS, saying, they call me And I'm saying, give me the phone. Give the phone to the EMS person. And telling the EMS person that they have to take the family member to the Comprehensive Stroke Care Center. Because, so one of our employees in Minneapolis, we have a lot of Minneapolis people in here, right? Raise your hand. Viet had a stroke at the gym, was picked up, he's a teacher, young guy, my age, picked up, taken to a primary stroke care center, eventually transferred to a comprehensive center, had some disability, went through a year rehab, went back to teaching, went back to the gym, had another stroke at the gym with his wife. EMS came to pick him up, and they were going to take him back to the same primary stroke care center. And she actually had to threaten to take him off the stretcher to put him in the back seat of her car because she wasn't going to see delay. She knew, and she was an informed advocate for her husband. But this is a couple of years ago, right? So I think taking the time to know the signs and symptoms, and then knowing about the Comprehensive Stroke Care Center in your area is important. And you may not be able to tell them. So this is the take two, tell two. Do it for yourself, because if you're having a major stroke, the likelihood that you're going to be able to tell them where they need to take you is very low. And you need to make sure your family members and friends would know.
So learn the name of the Comprehensive Stroke Care Clinic near you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately. I hate to tell anybody that about a life-threatening, time-sensitive condition, but honestly, guys, it's the reality today.
No, that's really good. We've done 20 of these conferences. That's probably the best single piece of advice we've ever gotten.
1 in 6 of us in here.
So
1 in 6,
thank you.
guys.
Yeah, so one at almost pretty much every table.
Yeah.
That's pretty scary. So, but I mean, this is a conference about technology and innovation. What are the innovations and the technological solutions that are going to change the paradigm here?
So we are pretty effective at getting these vessels open, but it's not always as fast as we want. You know, this is a minimally invasive procedure. They can go through the groin just like a cardiac cath, go into the brain and take this out. So I think improving the technology to get to more distal areas in the brain, improving the access that gets you there faster, because every second counts in stroke, is incredible. The holy grail of stroke, really, if you look at where all the money was pumped in the last 20 years, was around, is really more pharmaceutical in nature, looking at how do you extend the time window? How do you decrease the demands for oxygen or reduce the damage that's going on in the brain pharmaceutically to prolong the amount of time that the brain stays viable? Right. And there's been billions of dollars that were put into that, and none of that has been successful. But the problem was, you preserve the brain. If you never open the blood vessel, it's going to die, at some point in time. So we really think that what we call neuroprotection, kind of conjunctively with the device world, if we can get patients there and get them there quickly, our research data shows that if we could get everybody to treatment in under 90 minutes, almost 90% of patients could walk away from a severe stroke with no disability. So I think that should be an aspirational goal for us. By the way, that's the standards for acute MI. Onset to needle, door to needle, under 90 minutes. If we can get quick that way, and I think then it's going to be really combining what can we do to help slow the oxygen demands in the brain, preserve the brain from damage, and really extend that time window. There's a new study will be reported at late-breaking trials at the International Stroke Conference, where they're showing in some patients, if you still have viable brain all the way out to 12 hours, you can be treated, and this shows benefit. Yeah.
So you said 1.9 million neurons
per minute.
How many neurons?
I think this is an above average crowd. They might lose more than that per minute. Yeah. They may be well endowed, I'm going to guess.
I'm tempted to ask how many neurons you destroy in a night of drinking.
It's not anywhere close.
Okay.
Not anywhere close.
Okay. So.
But your baseline would be lower to start with if that indeed was a problem for you, Brian.
Okay. So we talked about the problem in our emerging markets internationally. They're far behind our standards. Yeah. What are you guys doing to? Medtronic's a global company. That's what you guys do. Yeah. Change the world, yada yada. Like, what are you guys doing to try to change that?
We're working. The Brazilian government actually funded, in all of the economic distress that they have, it's #1 cause of death in Brazil. They have funded a trial to see if you can replicate the outcomes that we've seen in all of the other studies that have been published in that healthcare system, which is the largest public healthcare system in the world, in Brazil. So there's a clinical trial that's ongoing there that will determine if they will fund that in that public healthcare system. We have extensive work ongoing in China. It's the #1 cause of death in China, and the mortality of stroke is 5 times higher in China for the same kind of stroke that it is in the US. So that is a really booming market where patients are just now getting access to care. We're trying to take all the learnings that we've had from working in the other systems of care and find out how to translate those there. Some healthcare systems were just so far from the basic services. India, you don't have ambulance transport, and it can take 4.5 or 5 hours, right, to get somebody across town. So you really have to be, with the resources we have to be laser focused on where can we actually have an impact, right? Eventually, you hope you get all the way down the list.
Yeah.
But
Still so much work to do. So let's switch gears a little bit, because I'm kind of freaked out.
you want me to get off my stroke soapbox? It's my favorite soapbox.
No, I know, it's really important. Thank you. You talked a little bit about your trajectory, how you got here. You were at KCI, but prior to that, you were a critical care nurse. Did a little work at the Medevac, trauma, ICU.
Yeah.
Before we kind of get into your path, how you got there, which of those kind of stations that you took really you think had the biggest impact on your career going forward? Was it as a trauma nurse? Was it critical care? Was it ICU? Like which and
I
how?
would never give away my clinical foundation. I think ingrained in me how much there is still that we can't figure out for people, because in the ICU people die. It's something you learn to deal with. Yeah. I lost a 16-year-old Mandy to a condition called ARDS, and that was a pivot point for me. I became very passionate about how on earth can we not do better? How can we not figure this out? And the chairman of Department of Surgery asked me to start doing some research work with him for free. He didn't have any money, but he was passionate about doing research. He knew I was passionate about that. And that actually started my career. It was doing pharmaceutical research at the time, but I kind of fell into that. It wasn't by design for me. But I saw very quickly that really quality work done on the clinical side, be it device or drug, had the impact of tons of patients, not the 3 that I could take care of in a day. So that was transformative for me to make that link. And I never said, hey, I'm going to go run a medical device division at Medtronic. It wasn't, I wish I could tell you I was that smart. I fell in and was very passionate about that, and then had the opportunity to step over to R&D and work with R&D closely, and then regulatory and clinical and designing and engaging with the FDA. I'm an atypical profile. I got my first sales job running a $100+ million division in Europe, and I think most people thought my boss was crazy, right? Yeah. I see more people like me who really come with atypical background coming into the general management roles, I think both at Medtronic and other places. But the clinical foundation for me will always be something that I think becomes central to the way that I do what I do today. Yeah. And I still have a lot to learn, I think, in terms of the business side of it.
And so you were recruited to join EV3 from KCI?
I was. I wasn't looking for a job. I was Senior Director of Clinical Development, so kind of crossing medical and R&D. I had some dual responsibilities and got the call from this little company. They had 3 people, and it did not look like many of my friends thought I was crazy. You're moving to California, it costs a fortune out there, and you're gonna take on a team of 3 people. You have 50 people under you right now. Mm-hmm. But I came in here and I could tell very quickly that the technology was profound, and the company, in terms of really understanding medical affairs and research, didn't know what they were doing. So I was looking for a place where I could have really high impact, and I found that. And then I also found, I think, leadership who was just very willing to let me play in the areas where I said I wanted to play, and that didn't box me in.
Right.
So.
EV3 is a pretty good success story, right? Acquired by Covidien.
Oh, it's an incredible success story when you look at what was done with Stacey and Sing and that team. So MTI EV3 EV3 to Covidien, and I joined right about that time. Covidien to Medtronic, and our division is one of the fastest growing businesses in Medtronic today.
I'm also noticing you had some pretty strong female executive role models there too, with Kathy Burzek at KCI.
Yeah, Kathy led KCI, Stacey at EV3.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. You talked about atypical roles and recruiting sort of atypical people for big roles. Medtronic has a pretty ambitious, you said 2020, a goal for 2020 for diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So Medtronic, Omar Ishrak manages diversity the same way we manage our business objectives. So we have an objective by 2020 to have 40% of females in leadership positions. And we're far away from that in some places.
Yeah, what is it now?
I'm sorry, what is it now?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. No.
Okay.
I can tell you, we have some work to do.
Okay.
But by setting a very firm goal, we're definitely seeing progress. And so we have objectives around not only gender diversity, but ethnic diversity in leadership as well. Mm-hmm. And as a general manager, as a business leader, I am metriced on that. It is something that I report with my financials, with my P&L. So, it's just, Medtronic really believes in the underlying premise that diverse thought is going to change the world. And so I think that's the one thing, we were early in our formative stages at Covidien of really getting our hands around what does diversity in the workplace look like. I think Medtronic has really committed to that, and its commitment based on the underlying principle of diversity of thought.
And it's a business goal, so there's no kind of skirting around this.
It affects my management objectives. It will affect my financial objectives as a leader if I fail on that goal the same way it would if I fail on a financial objective.
So where are you having difficulty filling? Is it in the engineering space, or is it more along the lines of biz dev, sales?
I'm going to tell you where I'm struggling the greatest today to recruit female leadership is in the sales side of the business, actually. And I think if you look across medical device sales as a whole, minus, OBGYN specific or women's disease specific areas, the statistics around women in sales leadership, it's just abysmal. Yeah. Certainly we have a long way to go in engineering, but I think we're getting more traction, and I have some of my engineering team in the room. I think we're getting a little more traction there. One of the things you find is it's not just recruiting women into sales leadership, it's retaining them. It is more challenging there.
Why is that?
I think there's a lot of reasons for it. If there's any part of the business, I think the gender challenges come into play. So I'll give you my space as an example because it's an easy one to call out. There are 10 female neurointerventionalists in the country. 10. So you can count them on your hands. Radiation, and there's things that play into that could play into a woman's decision to go into the space or not, but it's not common. So you have a heavily male sales force, let's say 10 to 1 would be something close to my statistics today. And then you have a almost exclusively male physician base. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think the challenges around that, and then you add in the demand of schedule. Stroke is an on-call condition. Our reps they go in for stroke call, they do those things. The demands of the job, and then I think that gender dynamic plays heavier for us. And it's not an easy position to be in, I think.
So, but you have to meet these goals. So are you, how as a leader, how do you kind of judge somebody's atypical experience and if it's going to fit? Is there any sort of advice you can give us in terms of how you can help build what you can't buy?
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm at. We had a regional sales leadership position that I said, hey, this is it. This is number 9. We have 8 men. We are going to get a diverse candidate here. We're going to hire a woman in this role. And really, really looked. And what was coming to me was we were going to have to take a candidate who had basically no sales leadership experience and no domain expertise and put them over, I would tell you, I believe in our space we have a very high-end, high-horsepower sales force. They get to us after having worked in the cardiovascular space and other things. And I looked at that, and I'm pushing that we're going to do this, but then I look at this and say, man, the worst thing I can do for a diversity candidate, for a female in this position, is to set her up to fail. And I felt like that's what I was doing. And so that was kind of a pivotal moment for me to realize, look, I wouldn't do this to a male candidate. I'm trying to achieve a diversity objective, but I'm not setting somebody up for success. So, we've really pivoted our strategies to build them. And we have got to, I think, take high potential females in the sales leadership space and put them on accelerated intensive tracks. And Medtronic has some programs that they've done with that really drive to develop that skill and accelerate the skill. And then we're doing some things on top of that.
Yeah. It seems like so much work.
It is, but I think it's important work.
I agree. But how do we kind of move that past sort of diversity as a thing we strive to do and diversity as a thing that we have to do?
Yeah, so I think...
And how do we sell the value of that?
I look for this in my organization, by the way. Anybody who uses the word quota with me, and it's not a dirty word, but it means that you're not bought in, right? When I'm dealing with a leader or dealing with somebody that I'm hiring that's concerned about what this does for candidates, tells me that they haven't fundamentally bought into the value of diversity in the business. And I'm not going to get on a different soapbox, but there's a hell of a lot of data out there, guys, that says that diverse leadership teams do better, right? And it's not about women doing better, it's about diversity doing better. Right. It's better for the bottom line. They can show it to you in politics, they can show it to you in business, they can show it to you in medicine, in hospital administration. You can go down the list. And so anytime I find myself in those conversations, it tells me we got to go back to the body of research and go back to whether or not you're actually bought in on the value of diversity.
And it helps too when you have this as an organizational striving goal.
You're not, there's no excuse you're going to hand Omar that says, I tried.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
So we're clearly at a moment in our business world where the standards for how women are treated are changing, and rightfully so. How women are heard and the standards for which people treat each other are changing. MedTech, or being brought to bear. MedTech hasn't had its Me Too moment. But,
it's coming.
But yeah, we know it's coming. So how does this industry make sure that when that moment comes that we show leadership?
The first thing is, I think, acknowledging that it's coming. This has afforded me a lot of opportunity because people will ask me a question that they've wanted to ask me forever and didn't, right? Is this real? I mean, has this ever happened to you? And I think the funny thing is, you talk to men and they're shocked by the fact that this is happening in politics, it's happening in business, it's happening, everything from Google to the House of Representatives to Hollywood. And you talk to women and you say, man, are you surprised that this is happening? And every woman in the room will say, no. I think the moment is coming. I think we as business leaders have to be very serious in the way that we handle this, and we need to be vocal about setting standards. I think as a business leader, one of the worries I have is, look, I don't want somebody to be falsely accused. And do I believe anybody when you have 10 or 12 people coming forward, I think the likelihood that this is a charade, right? This is a master orchestrated charade, and you are unjustly accused, I think is low. I think as a business leader, I always want to make sure that I'm being fair to really listen to each and every incident and not unfairly put anybody in my organization in the guilty before proven, guilty bucket. So I think we take that onus as business leaders, but I think the most important thing is talking about it. For me, it's just talking about it. Guys, come on, this is going on somewhere in this business, and it's not all right. And if I haven't said it to you before, shame on me. But the TV and the news last night gave me the moment of pause to stop and talk to every one of you. And I want to make sure that everybody's clear about this is not acceptable, right? And if it's happening, you don't have an option, you have an obligation. to come and talk to me or talk to somebody in the business. And I think we're at a moment now where women feel empowered to do that, and they just haven't before. So I think my central role in this is opening the dialogue. And I think if every business leader will commit to opening the dialogue, then it's going to move us through the process and the pain, I think, much more quickly.
Great. Thank you for your candor. I appreciate that. So we can do some, would you like to do some questions from the audience?
I'm absolutely interested in questions
So
from the audience.
Sarah is back there with a microphone. So if
The
you
question is the audience interested in questions from the audience?
Oh yeah, no, they're interested. We just got to get the ice rolling.
Hi, I'll take the starter. I'm Debbie Donovan, Endogastric Solutions. Could you speak a little bit more on what it took to get market development as a concept in your field organization off the ground? It's an ongoing challenge for medical device.
It is absolutely a challenge because you can't attach an ROI to it, right? The things you're asking them to do, you can't attach a standard sales quota and a number to it because then the work that you're doing becomes questionable. So I think data, the data in stroke, I'm gonna tell you, I think it was easier for us than it probably is in many other areas. And I know many of my other leadership colleagues at Medtronic grapple with this more than we did. The data and the statistics are so overwhelming to say the number one thing you can do to make sure you sell more of this product or sell more of this therapy is just make sure the patients who could use the therapy get there. When you have the kind of statistics I talked about, 10%, 10 to 15% in the US, 1% globally, it's a pretty convincing story. And the ROI on that is just, it's so tangible in the patient stories. And we did a registry at the same time that we were implementing this. And we were collecting data within systems of care at the point that we were just starting to put these people in place and do the work. And then we looked at every patient. How long did it take them? How many times were they routed appropriately? How much time could you cut out of the overall cycle? And did that change outcomes for patients? And even within 1,000 patients in the US, we're able to show this data. So I was able to attach, because that research needed to be done anyway, data that kind of closed the loop and validated the hypothesis that this was something that was very valuable. I'm going to tell you, I have that distinct sales force in the US. We don't have that everywhere. I have one in each country in Europe, which is not acceptable, right? So designing it there, you have to work within different systems, and it's not Europe is one, it's Europe is 18. So we're slower in progression there, but I think we've proven the value. And I would say if you're going to do it without data, it's the first thing that comes on the block later on, right? When that's what happens when going gets tough, because anybody who doesn't carry a quota is suspect when times are challenging.
Great. We can do one more. Well, we've done such a good job. No, we've answered all
They
their
want to go
questions.
to bed. They want to go home.
Come on. All right, let's get this last one, and then we're going to just...
Hi, I'm Bill Lev from Acorn Product Development. I'm curious, you say that the procedure costs between $15,000 and $20,000?
Total, everything, not the device. That's everything in the procedure.
My question was, what percentage of that is the device versus the medical care providers, or the overhead that goes along with it?
So if I'm looking at the procedure, these patients who are having a stroke are going to come to the hospital anyway. And if they don't get better, they have long hospitalizations, they don't do well, right? The procedure itself typically is somewhere in the range of 2 hours in total that a patient will be in the cath lab. Device costs total burdened, they probably on average are about $7,500. 8,000, depending on exactly what they need for the procedure, you're kind of in that range. The DRG for the procedure as a whole is relatively viable. It really is. It's not a loss leader for hospitals who do it well. And so that's one of the problems, is stroke DRG is not a bad DRG, and hospitals don't want to give it up, and they don't want to transport their patients. And there's some controversy right now. American Heart Association has come out with some new proposal for an endovascular ready center, not a comprehensive center. So you don't have to meet all the requirements. Now, the goal would be to really answer disparity, right? All of the regions where you don't have good stroke care, that's not what will happen. What's going to happen is you're going to add 12 more centers in Los Angeles. And this, like any other complex medical procedure, is volume dependent. Outcomes are faster, outcomes are better in a higher volume center versus a lower volume center. So what we don't really want to have happen is to have 12 more centers in Los Angeles. You're better to, you need 8, 10 good centers that do it routinely, do it well. And that's the model you see in Germany. Germany probably has the best stroke healthcare system in the world. The best percentage of patients getting treated, master planned. So I think, the DRG being halfway attractive, the hospitals are not losing money on this. There's not an incentive not to do it. The incentive to do it, but maybe do it at lower volumes, I think is a risk. That's uncontrolled in the way healthcare gets organized in the US today.
Great. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for sharing so much incredible information and for being so candid. It was really wonderful to spend time
Take
with you.
two, tell two. That's
Yeah.
my request of everybody in the room. That proliferates. There are a lot of people who could have a much better outcome in stroke if everyone here will go talk about it.
Great.
So
We will. Thank you.
you.